Hey guys, Mr. T here. This is another video and this is on reading share listing information. So obviously the first aspect of being able to do shares mathematics is be able to get shares information, to get the numbers to do that maths with. Now newspapers and online publications, online being like Yahoo Finance, and we're going to use that in your DI, they produce a daily share list to track the share activities of companies from the previous day. So at the most basic level, you can make buying and selling decisions using the info presented on these share listings. That's at the most basic level. Obviously, you need to do more research if you want to make proper decisions, but you can, at a pinch, use these numbers that are presented daily to make a decision. So if you're going to make those decisions to use your money, it's important to understand each point's meaning. So a typical share listing looks like so. It's a little table. Obviously, this is only one company, but it'll have typical columns like this. They may have changed recently with more information, but overall, this is a good idea of what you may see. So the above share listing shows typical information columns and info for one company, or the company we're talking about is ABB Grain. So don't worry about the code for now. In your DI and in the current level of shares, you're going to be dealing with an ASX code. Right now, the code here I've just copied from the textbook. So we'll start with stock. Stock is the abbreviated name for the company, ABB Grain. 4 p.m. close, that's the closing price at 4 p.m. on the day of the share listing. So if this was today, today's listing, then $6.80 is what the company finished at 4 p.m., which is when the stock exchange closes, the last sale price for the day. Move is the movement of the share price from the previous day's close. It allows you to work out the closing price from the previous day. So sometimes it's going to be positive, sometimes it's going to be negative. In this case, it's a positive 0.06. So it went up by 6 cents from yesterday's closing price. Volume. The volume is the number of shares traded on the day of listing. As a volume can be large numbers, sometimes you'll see the volume is given in hundreds or thousands. In this case, it's hundreds. So it's not 362 shares traded, it's 362,000, which is actually 36,200 shares were traded. The other thing to keep in mind is that's not 32,600 bought or 32,600 sold. The volume is the number of shares traded, so it's a total bought and sold. So it gives you an idea of how interested people were in it. It doesn't tell you how many were bought and sold directly. Alright, next one is buy. The highest buy bid by the close of trading. Sell is the lowest sell offer by the close of trading. Year high, the highest selling price in the past 12 months. Year low, the lowest selling price in the past 12 months. So these four offer you a way to make a really simple decision as to buying or selling, because you can compare how much it's being bought for, how much it's being sold for right now compared to how it's been in the past 12 months. And if it's being sold right now for a lot higher than it was in the last 12 months, it might be a good idea to sell because you'll make a lot of money. Or if it's being bought quite low compared to what it's been bought for previously in the past 12 months, you might want to buy. So that just gives you a simplistic ideas as to when to buy and sell. The next column is dividend yield, or div yield. The previous year's dividend return as a percentage of the closing price. So the dividend is the company sharing some of its profits to all of its shareholders. That's called a dividend. And the div yield is representing that amount of money as a percentage of the share price you got back from last year's, a percentage of the share price. So it's like comparing how much money you get per share to how much each share cost in the first place. Overall, you just need to understand that higher is better. Essentially, it's telling you how many percent of the share price you're getting back from the dividend last year. So let's say your if we look at ABB Grain, the dividend yield is 4.41. The F stands for fully franked. We'll get into more detail about what franking is later when we do dividend tax, but 4.41%, that's telling you you're getting 4.41% of the share price from last year's dividend back with the dividend. So let's say it cost $6.80 to buy those shares. Well, you're going to get 4.41% of that back through a dividend without having to do anything. Just the company's paying you that money because they're sharing their profits with you. So that's a way of earning money on the share market. PE ratio is the price earnings ratio. It compares the share price to the company's earnings. Specifically, the PE ratio is the company's share price and however much money it earns per share. So it gives you a way to judge how successful a company is based on how much it's worth, given by the share price, and how much profit it makes divided into the number of shares. So we'll elaborate on that in our upcoming video, upcoming exercise. So that's just a general gist of those columns. Let's run through an example for ABB Grain. So read the above share listing to answer the following questions. How many ABB shares were traded? Well, we already answered that, but I'll have a look again. It says 362, but it's in hundreds, so it's 36200, so 36,200. 36,200 shares traded. I think I said above 32,600. That was a mistake by me. It's 36,200. 2. What was the closing price and movement of ABB Grain shares? So reading off the columns, it closed at 6.80 and it moved 6 cents. So close $6.80, it moved up 6 cents. What was the closing price of ABB Grain on the previous day? So this is an example of how you would work that out using the information provided. We don't know directly what it closed at the previous day, but we know how much it closed at today, $6.80, and it moved up by 6 cents from the previous day. So how do we work that out, what it was the previous day? Well, we minus 6 cents. So yesterday's close, 6.80 minus 6 cents, that would be $6.74. Detail the previous year's high and low prices for ABB Grain. So you look at year high, year low. Year high was $7.99, year low was $5.90. So high $7.99, low $5.90, was it? I'll just double check. Short-term memory is not too good. $7.99, $5.90. So you've indicated how much they were, the highest that they sold for and the lowest that they sold for the previous year. 5. What were the day's highest and lowest prices paid for ABB Grain? Highest and lowest prices, $6.78 and $6.80 we have. So $6.80 and $6.78. So lowest, $6.78. High, $6.80. Did ABB Grain pay dividend last year? Well, yes, because it had a yield. You can't have a yield if you didn't pay a dividend in the first place, because then it would be 0%. So, yes. Detail the buy-sell bids for ABB Grain at the close of trading. So this is essentially the same answer as before. $6.78 and $6.80. Buy $6.78, sell $6.80. Find the dividend paid per share by ABB Grain the past year. What franking levels indicated? Well, we can answer the first part. F means fully franked. And now we need to work out the dividend paid per share. Well, we know that it was 4.41%. So as a decimal is 0.0441, and we know it's a percentage of the share price. So we just need to work out what 4.41% of the share price was, which is currently $6.80. So 0.0441 times by $6.80. Sorry, grab a calculator. $0.0441 times by 680 is 0.29988. Therefore, that would indicate 30 cents. So now we've got PE ratio. What's the PE ratio for ABB grain? Well, the PE ratio is 14. PE is 14. What does this indicate? Well, we need to think about how the PE ratio was achieved. It's the share price divided by the earnings per share. Unfortunately, we don't know what the earnings per share is, but we can still interpret what PE ratio means here, because we know $6.80 was the share price. $6.80 is going to have to be divided by less than 1 to get 14. Okay, so it's not earning a huge amount of money per share, but the company is worth quite a lot. So this will be elaborated on the next exercise anyway, but it's not the biggest number that it could be. It's in the middle. Okay, it's not a really small number. It's not as if you did $6.80 divided by 100. It's not earning hundreds of dollars per share, which would make the PE ratio incredibly small. But it's sort of middle of the road. So the interpretation of this would be reasonable value. And if interested, and for an exercise we're doing later, there's a table of values for that on page 388 of your textbook. And lastly, describe the transactions and trading situation for ABB grain this day. Would you purchase shares based on this information? I'm not going to rewrite all of these numbers here. I'm just going to interpret them and answer the question, would I purchase shares based on this information? We can see that there was quite a bit of interest, but that's not a groundbreaking amount. 36,200 shares were traded. We don't know if they're buying or selling. We know that it moved up from the previous day, but what's most important here is looking at how much it cost, or how much the shares are compared to the previous year. So the lowest it's been in the previous year is $5.90, the highest is $7.99, and we're hovering around $6.80. So it's like it's in between. It's right smack bang in the middle of the year's highest and lowest prices. So would I purchase shares based on this information? No, it's not the lowest it could be. Low as it could be. It's moving around because of the move. It's moving considerably. And yeah, just looking at the numbers, I'm quite indifferent about it. There's not a huge amount of interest. That's only 36,200 shares traded. Not significant levels of interest. So other people don't seem interested in buying or selling these shares. So I would say no. It would have to be a very, very low price compared to previous years to really decide to buy them. and that's the absolute most basic interpretation of these numbers. You really wouldn't make a buying decision based on comparing the current price with the previous years. You want to do more research, but you can see from this that from the share listing we can have a look at two numbers and like make a really basic decision. So hopefully that helps you out with share list reading. We're going to go into a bit more detail in the next video about what PE ratio is, because we need to just see what the PE ratio appears on the share listings. We need to go into what PE ratio calculations are in the next video and elaborate on it. So hopefully that helps you out, and I'll see you on the next one.